There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to make the galaxy remember your name. On the ash-stained world of High Varus, where the air itself scours the lungs, and the sun is a dim red wound in the sky, death is as common as dust. The manufactorums belch smoke without pause, and the screams of servitors echo down metal canyons where men are born only to labor and die for the Imperium. Above the hive spires, the faint shimmer of orbital bombardment scars the heavens, a perpetual reminder that the Emperor's light burns dim here. But on this day, something different comes from the sky. It begins as a streak of fire, a shard of light tearing through the thick clouds that blanket the hive world. Auspex towers flare to life, Vox channels erupt with terrified chatter. Pilots assume it's an orbital strike. Civilians fall to their knees praying to the Emperor for mercy. Yet this falling light does not impact with the fury of an asteroid, with the holy wrath of an exterminatus. It touches down with precision, a blinding column of energy. Then silence. When the smoke clears, only a crater remains, its edges glowing with unnatural heat. And at its center, one man stands. No armor, no weapon, no heraldry. Only dust, wind, and a gaze that pierces through reality itself. The first witnesses, a patrol from the 112th Varus Line Infantry, approach with las guns drawn. Their sergeant, a veteran of a dozen planetary wars, orders a perimeter. His Vox crackles with static as he reports, "Command, we've got a survivor. Doesn't look like a drop trooper, standing at ground zero, no radiation damage. Permission to—" His words cut short when the figure turns toward them. The soldiers freeze. The stranger moves, not fast, but with a purpose that bends the world around him. A sudden gust lifts the dust at his feet, and before any guardsman can blink, he's beside them. Not a single motion wasted, not a flicker of hostility, yet their las guns are now disassembled in their hands, components neatly stacked on the ground. The sergeant stares in disbelief. "Throne of Terra," he whispers. "Who are you?" The man does not answer. He simply looks skyward, eyes narrowing, as if he senses something none of them can see. And Auspex operator checks her device. "Sir, he's not showing up. I mean, he's there, but the readings are impossible. Temperatures off the scale, biosigns flatline, Vox distortions maxed out." Then, before anyone can react, the VoxNet goes dead. Across the hive, every frequency collapses into silence. In the command bastion above, Inquisitor Kael Vareth receives the report. His voice is a low growl, layered with suspicion and authority. "Deploy containment teams. If the Emperor wills it, we will learn what this thing is, and if not, we will burn it from the face of the galaxy." The Inquisition moves fast. Servitors clank down corridors, data priests chant over flickering cogitators, and black ships reroute orbit. A biological anomaly landing within Imperial territory is no mere curiosity. It's a potential heresy. Yet the man in the crater waits. He stands motionless for hours as storm fronts roll in, lightning painting his silhouette against the darkened horizon. When the winds rise, he does not flinch. When the first drops of acid rain hiss against his skin, they evaporate before touching him. By nightfall, the crater is surrounded by Imperial Guard barricades and Mechanicus sensor pylons. Floodlights pierce the dark, illuminating the impossible figure. The soldiers whisper in vox masks, spinning rumors like children around a campfire, that he's a saint reborn, a primarch in exile, or a weapon forged by the Emperor himself. When the Inquisitor arrives, his retinue parts the crowd. Cloaked acolytes and servo-skulls orbit him as he descends into the crater. His voice cuts through the storm. "Identify yourself in the name of the God Emperor of mankind." The man finally turns to face him. His expression is calm, almost amused. He speaks one word so quietly it almost goes unheard. "Eth." Varath frowns. "What world is that?" The man does not answer. Behind them the auspex hums louder. Magos Ingensiors glance at each other in confusion. The readings fluctuate between organic and divine. The machine spirit weeps under the pressure of something it cannot understand. Then the stranger moves again. He kneels, presses his palm against the scorched earth, and the crater heals. Rock refuses, metal flows, and for one brief, impossible moment, the Mechanicus's machines chant in unison. Sanctus pattern recognized, unknown alpha origin signature detected. Varath's expression hardens. He knows heresy when he sees it. "Seize him!" Dozens of lasguns ignite. The next few seconds vanish in blinding motion, a flurry of strikes faster than servo reflexes can register. The storm of energy dissipates. Every guard in the ring stands unharmed, but their weapons lie in pieces once more. The man dusts his hands and looks toward the hive spires. The faintest smirk touches his lips. The Inquisitor can only whisper, "By the Emperor's soul, what have we found?" Above them, the clouds shift. The warp stirs. Something in the immaterial notices. And for the first time in millennia, the galaxy holds its breath. In the depths of the orbiting inquisitorial vessel Sanctity of Judgment, alarms whispered like hymns of paranoia. Cogitators hummed as lines of red data streamed across holo displays, each fragment relaying a single truth. Something impossible had landed on Vares. Inquisitor Kael Varath stood alone in the strategium, watching the pulsing image of the crater below. Every reading from the surface was corrupted. Heat signatures looped, vox signals scrambled, and motion trackers froze in recursive errors. Even the blessed machine spirits of the Adeptus Mechanicus refused to process what they saw. "The Emperor's light does not account for this," murmured Magos Lexum, his voice rendered hollow by the respirator grill. "No," Varath replied, fingers tracing the scar that cut across his jaw. "But the warp does." He stared at the grainy pict feed showing the figure standing amid the guardsmen, serene, immovable, radiating authority that made even hardened soldiers lower their weapons unconsciously. Charisma, Varath knew when he saw it, but this bordered on divine intimidation. "Prepare the Ordo Exynos data lattice," the Inquisitor ordered, "and bring me a psyker. If this being bears a soul, I want it measured." On the planet below, the 112th Vares Line Infantry held their ground around the landing site. Fear had become the air they breathed, yet a strange calm spread among them, a serenity that should not have existed in the presence of an unknown. The man hadn't spoken again. He merely stood, watching the hive skyline, as if waiting for something to arrive. Sergeant Hale adjusted his rebreather, muttering to his Vox officer. "Feels like the air's heavier near him. You notice that? Like the gravity's thicker. And Vox channels still down, not even a whisper from command." Their auspex pinged, movement above. The Inquisitor's shuttle broke atmosphere, a spear of black and gold descending through the cloud banks. Servo skulls drifted around its hull, trailing incense smoke as it touched down near the perimeter. Outstrode Kael Varoth, robed in the sigils of the Inquisition, flanked by stormtroopers and robed magi. Every guardsman snapped to attention. The stranger didn't move. "I am Inquisitor Varoth," he declared, voice amplified by his Vox cherubim. "By authority of the Holy Ordos, I command this world and all upon it. You unknown entity will kneel before imperial law." The man blinked once. No motion, no sign of obedience or defiance, just silence. Varoth's jaw tightened. He signaled to his retinue. 2 stormtroopers advanced and immediately stopped mid-step. The Mago screamed in binary, "Energy surge, undefined frequency." Blue lightning crackled across the crater rim. The troopers convulsed as their power armor locked. Their servo cables melted into the rock. When the flash ended, both stood perfectly still, not untouched, but frozen by systems that refused to move. The Inquisitor's eyes narrowed. Psychic interference? The attached sanction psyker, trembling and veined with warp glow, staggered forward. "Not the warp," she gasped. He isn't there. I can't read him. He's—" Her sentence ended in a scream. Blood streamed from her eyes as her soul flared like a dying star. The man had merely looked at her. When she fell, her body turned to ash before hitting the ground. The Inquisitor's hand went to his bolt pistol, but he did not draw it. He had seen demons, xenos, warp anomalies. None of them had ever acted without malice. None of them had exuded such calm. The man finally spoke. His voice was steady, grounded, not loud, but it carried like thunder through the dust. "You're looking in the wrong place." Varoth frowned. "Explain yourself." The man pointed upward. Through the crimson haze, the Inquisitor saw it, the ethereal distortion of the upper atmosphere bending, like ripples in water. Lightning formed concentric circles. Vox static howled in every channel. "The warp?" Varoth asked. "Something worse," the stranger replied. The auspex confirmed his words. Reality itself was unraveling. An incoming surge of immaterium resonance, chaos energy blooming above the hive spires. The Inquisitor turned to his aides. "All Vox to emergency channels. Summon the planetary governor. Mobilize every regiment." But as he barked orders, the distortion resolved into something horrifying, an eye vast and lidless, gazing through the storm clouds like a god peering through thin glass. Demonic whispers flooded the Vox nets, thousands of voices chanting in languages older than light. The warp had taken notice, drawn by the stranger's mere existence. The Inquisitor's stormtroopers opened fire reflexively. Bolter shells screamed into the sky. None struck home. They simply dissolved. The stranger remained calm. His eyes glowed faintly. No psychic flare, no witchlight, just a quiet power that hummed in the air like pressure before thunder. He clenched one fist. A single shockwave rolled across the crater, silent but devastating. The demonic eye vanished. The warp distortion collapsed in on itself. The sky cleared. Then quiet.
Every man present fell to his knees, some whispering litanies, others weeping openly. Even Varath bowed his head, not in worship, but in awe. The stranger looked at him once more. "Your world's about to burn," he said. "You'll want to get ready." And before the Inquisitor could reply, he simply started walking toward the Hive City, the storm parting around him as if it feared his passage. High above, Magos Lexum analyzed the aftermath in disbelief. His voice trembled through the voxnet. "Inquisitor, the crater soil registered reverse entropy, negative energy state collapse. That shouldn't be possible." Varath's eyes followed the departing figure, already half-shrouded in acid rain. "Nothing about this is possible," he said quietly, "and that's exactly why I need to know what he is." In the warp's unseen tides, something stirred again. A ripple of fear, not from mortals, but from demons. For the first time in eternity, they whispered a name they did not understand, a name that carried power beyond their nightmares. They called it the Fist of Terra.
The acid rains fell harder over Hive Varus, painting the metal spires in rivers of corroded green. Down in the lower levels, where light never touched and the air burned with refinery fumes, word spread faster than the Mechanicus could suppress it. A man had come from the stars who could not be harmed. To the laborers and hive scum, he was a rumor of hope. To the Inquisition, he was an anomaly. To the Ecclesiarchy, he was a heresy in the shape of a man. And to the 112th Varus Line Infantry, he was walking straight toward the gates. Sergeant Hale watched from the barricades, lasgun clutched in trembling hands. The stranger's pace was slow but deliberate. Each footfall echoed with weight, though he carried no armor, no weapon. The Vox remained dead, the Auspex blind. Hale's second-in-command, Trooper Riva, leaned forward. "He's unarmed. You think we should—" "Don't." Hale's voice was iron. "We try to stop him, we'll just embarrass ourselves." Still, protocol was protocol. Hale activated the local loudhailer. "Unidentified entity, halt! This is restricted Imperial territory. Identify yourself and await inquisitorial clearance." The man did not respond. He didn't even glance at the speakers. Instead, he approached the massive steel blast gates, several tons of plasteel and ceremit reinforced by Mechanicus sanctification. And then, casually, he knocked. The sound reverberated through the entire defense wall like a thunderclap. Dust fell from the ramparts, and the gate groaned as though struck by an orbital shell. The troopers fell back instinctively. When the echoes faded, the gate hissed and opened itself. A low gasp rippled through the soldiers. The Magos overseeing the gate's machine spirit stammered through his vox beads. It obeyed him. No command input, no cog key authorization. It just obeyed. The stranger stepped inside. The interior of Hive Varus Delta was a nightmare of industry. Endless rows of manufactorums, forge vents spewing fire, and laborers toiling beneath the gaze of enforcer servitors. Yet, as he walked through the corridors, the noise seemed to fade. The furnaces dimmed. The servitors paused mid-motion. Even the ever-present hum of the hive machinery faltered. To the watching workers, it was as if the hive itself bowed its head. The stranger said nothing. He passed through the corridors like a ghost of purpose, unbothered by the stench of oil or the screams of the overworked. Those who made eye contact felt something impossible. Peace. Sergeant Hale followed with a squad, trying to maintain formation, though none dared raise a weapon. Every instinct screamed that this was something beyond them. At the command node above, Inquisitor Varath and Magos Lexum watched through remote pict feeds, though static gnawed at every frame. He's heading for the central cathedral, the one dedicated to the Emperor Ascendant. Appropriate, Varath muttered. Even heretics crave validation. He opened a vox line to his acolyte stationed in the cathedral. Seal the doors, prepare containment protocols. Inside the cathedral, the stranger stopped before a massive statue of the Emperor, golden, cracked, its right hand broken by bombardment decades prior. Candles burned at its feet. Pilgrims knelt, whispering litanies that had lost meaning generations ago. The stranger stood there for a long moment. Then, softly, he reached out and touched the shattered marble fingers. The stone reformed. Every pilgrim gasped. The broken hand reshaped itself, marble glowing gold-hot until it matched the rest of the statue. The Mechanicus sensors embedded in the shrine exploded from overload. The stranger simply said, "He was never gone." A priest fell to his knees, tears streaking through the grime on his face. You performed miracles." The stranger turned. "No, just repairs." The words carried humility, but the power behind them made the air itself hum. That was when the Inquisition struck. A flash of light, teleportation discharge. Inquisitorial stormtroopers appeared in full formation, weapons aimed. Servo Skull screamed the litany of purification. The cathedral filled with blinding light as containment fields snapped into place. Inquisitor Varath strode forward, rosette blazing. "By order of the Ordo Hereticus, you are hereby detained for investigation under suspicion of heretical divinity and unsanctioned miracle working. Submit or face summary execution." The stranger glanced around. "You think you came quickly? You think yourself above the Emperor's law?" Varath barked. "No, I think I am the law's consequence." Before anyone could parse the meaning, the containment field shattered like glass. Stormtroopers fired. Bolter rounds screamed, exploding in mid-air, caught in some invisible pressure wave. The Magos monitoring from orbit collapsed as the ship's cogitators overloaded, unable to interpret the readings. Varath drew his bolt pistol, but before he could aim, the stranger vanished. Not teleported, just moved. He stood beside the Inquisitor, calm as ever. "You seek control, but you've forgotten what it's for." And with that, he placed a single finger on the Inquisitor's chest. Not a strike, just a tap. Varath's armor systems shut down instantly. His heart skipped a beat, then resumed, perfectly normal. He fell to his knees, gasping. The stranger knelt beside him. "Your fight's not with me. Something worse is coming." "Worse?" he wheezed. The man pointed toward the cathedral's stained glass windows. Outside, lightning clawed the skies, but not ordinary lightning. It moved in patterns, hexagonal, deliberate. The Mechanicus would later classify it as structured energy descent. The first tyrannid spore pods were entering the atmosphere. The stranger rose. "Get your men ready." Varath, still breathless, looked up at him in awe and fear. "Who are you?"
The man looked back over his shoulder, eyes reflecting the storm. Just a Texan. Then he stepped outside into the acid rain, rolling up his sleeves as the first thunder of impact shook the hive. Above, orbit went black. The warp storm swelled. The hive of Varus, already a dying world, was about to become the stage for the impossible. And as the first spore pod hit the surface, every soul on the planet, even those who did not yet believe, felt the same thing. A presence watching them. A power older than their gods, stronger than their fear. The galaxy's rules had just changed.
The sky over Hive Varus ignited. Spore pods, tens of thousands of them, screamed through the atmosphere like falling meteors, trailing viridian fire. The heavens burned as the tyrannid swarm made planetfall, each impact birthing explosions of acidic ichor and chitinous horror. The hive world trembled under the assault of the great devourer. In the command bastion, Inquisitor Kael Varoth struggled to his feet, pale and shaken. The stranger's touch still lingered like a phantom heartbeat in his chest. His retinue rushed to his side. "My lord, your vitals!" "Ignore them," Varoth snapped. "Get every regiment mobilized. Deploy planetary defense cannons. Summon the PDF and the Arbites. I want the entire hive locked down." Magus Lexum's metallic voice cut through the Vox hum. "Incoming biosignatures exceed expected swarm density. Auspex saturation at 782%. The planet cannot hold, Inquisitor, not without orbital reinforcement." Varoth glared at the display. The sky was alive with red warnings. "Then we hold as long as we can. The Emperor demands nothing less." But in his mind, one thought gnawed deeper than any fear. Where is the stranger now? Down in the underhive, the people didn't need Auspex readings to know death was coming. The streets shook with distant impacts. Acid rain turned to steam as spores detonated, flooding lower levels with chittering creatures that clawed and screamed through the smog. The first wave was already devouring the outer districts. The Varus 112th Infantry formed formation lines at choke points, laser guns firing in disciplined bursts. Sergeant Hale barked orders through the din. "Keep formation. Aim for the head joints. Don't let them close." But for every gaunt that fell, 3 more replaced it. The guardsmen's lines buckled, retreating step by step through corridors filled with smoke and blood. The stench of promethium and ozone mixed with the shrieks of the dying. And then, silence. A sudden impact in the center of the street, powerful enough to crack the ferrocrete. The Tyranids halted mid-lunge, their hive-mind instinct flickering in confusion. A shape stood amidst the dust. It was him. No armor, no weapon. Only a torn sleeve rolled up past the elbow. The first Hormigaunt lunged, and the man moved. No one could see it clearly. One instant the beast was mid-leap, the next it was 2 pieces sliding apart, neatly bisected by an invisible strike. The troopers stared. The stranger caught another Tyranid mid-charge and punched, and the creature vaporized. Not exploded, not shredded, vaporized. The blast wave flattened a dozen more. Riva gaped. "What in the throne's name?" Hale managed to speak through the awe. "Keep firing. He's buying us time." And they did. Encouraged by the sight of the impossible man fighting at their side, the 112th regrouped. They advanced through the streets behind him, laser fire turning the air into a lattice of red light. The stranger waded through the swarm like a living weapon, his every movement deliberate, effortless, perfect.
No motion wasted, no step unbalanced. Every strike ended a life, every motion protected another. Competence incarnate. In the skies above, orbital picked feeds tried to track the anomaly. Magus Lexum watched the impossible reading scroll across his cogitator. Energy levels unmatched, bioscan undefined, machine spirit confused. Say it plainly, Varath growled. He registers as a null, but not in the warp. He's a physical impossibility, a being without flaw. The Inquisitor leaned closer to the holofeed, watching the lone human tearing through the Tyranid swarm. His voice was barely a whisper. He's fighting them, alone. Lexum's opticals refocused. Correction, not fighting, dominating. The data streams blipped, then cut entirely. Picked feeds died. Vox relays failed. Only one signal came through. The voice of Sergeant Hale, breathless amid the chaos. Command, this is the 112th. We're folding Sector Delta. No, we're pushing back. I repeat, the enemy's retreating. Emperor, save us. They're running. Varath's eyes widened. Tyranids do not retreat, ever. The Inquisitor turned to Lexum. Get me orbital visual confirmation. The feed flickered to life, showing the streets of Hive Varus. The stranger stood alone atop a pile of Tyranid corpses, the swarm recoiling from him, as if the hive mind itself feared his presence. The guardsmen rallied around him, their war cries echoing like hymns. The stranger looked skyward, and for a heartbeat, even from orbit, Varath thought he saw him glance directly into the lens. The Magus froze. Machine spirit reports external observation. He sees us. Varath whispered, by the Emperor's mercy. The stranger lifted one hand toward the sky, finger spread, and reality rippled. A beam of white gold energy erupted upward, slicing through cloud and spore alike. It didn't come from the warp. It wasn't psychic. It was raw physical will made manifest. Every Tyranid within a kilometer disintegrated into dust. Then the beam vanished. Silence fell. The survivors stared at the stranger, standing amid the vaporized remains of the swarm. No one dared speak. Even the ever-hungry Tyranids hesitated at the edge of the blast zone, hissing but refusing to advance. The man exhaled, a single breath that sounded like thunder rolling across the ruins. He turned toward the stunned soldiers. "You've got more coming," he said simply. "I'll clear the rest." Sergeant Hale managed to nod. "Sir, who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "Just a visitor." Then, without another word, he sprinted toward the next front, faster than the eye could follow, a blur of motion against the burning cityscape. From orbit, Varath whispered the only prayer he knew. "Emperor, if this is your hand, guide it. If not, deliver us from it." Because in that moment, the Inquisitor understood something no cogitator could calculate. The universe had just acquired a new variable, and whatever this man was, the galaxy would never be the same again. The swarm regrouped. As the first shock of the impossible massacre faded, the Tyranid synapse creatures screamed across the hive sprawl. Hive nodes pulsed with fury. Biotendrils reknit shredded flesh. Within minutes, a new wave began to form. Heavier, angrier, smarter. Warriors, carnifexes, hive tyrants, monsters bred for extermination. They converged on the lone human's position, as though the hive mind itself had focused all its hatred on this one anomaly. And still he stood. The guardsmen of the 112th had retreated to rearm and fortify the line, but many refused to fall back completely.
They climbed shattered rooftops and broken causeways just to watch. From their vantage point, they saw the man raise his fists, bare, unblooded, flawless. The first Carnifex charged. The ground quaked under its 4-ton bulk. Its armored skull could shrug off tank shells. The man didn't move until the last instant, then punched upward. The Carnifex stopped mid-stride. A microsecond later, its entire body imploded, crushed into a sphere the size of a skull. The shockwave tore nearby buildings apart. Another followed, and another. Each met the same end. One guardsman whispered, trembling, "Emperor's mercy, he's not human." Sergeant Hale didn't answer. He couldn't, because deep down he already agreed. In the upper hive spire, Inquisitor Varath watched through a flickering hololith. The image was unstable, as if the universe itself couldn't decide whether this event should exist. Inquisitor Varath, report. Data corruption increasing, machine spirits rejecting observation, probability threads fracturing. Meaning, my lord, reality doesn't want to record him. Varath turned away, jaw clenched. I want every record backed up manually. Etch it onto plasteel if you must. This being must be understood. Lexam hesitated. Understood or contained? Varath's eyes narrowed. We'll decide that after he's finished saving us. Meanwhile, deep beneath the hive, the stranger moved faster than any mortal eye could follow. He leapt from platform to platform, each step leaving a crater of shattered ferrocrete. Swarms poured toward him like rivers of living blades. He met them head-on, no hesitation, no fear. A Tyranid warrior lunged, scything talons raised, and the man caught both in his hands, stopping them cold. For a moment they struggled, muscles straining, claws shrieking against bone and sinew. Then, with casual ease, he ripped the creature in half, tossing the halves aside like refuse. Each movement was perfection, not rage, not desperation, just purpose. You things eat worlds, but you bit off the wrong planet. He swung his fist, and a wave of kinetic force rolled down the street, flattening an entire column of beasts. The shock wave echoed through the hive like the roar of a god. Then came the sound, a deep, distant rumble. The swarm was splitting. A new signal, psychic in nature, rippled through the atmosphere. Every living thing paused. Even the guardsmen felt it, a crawling, oppressive weight pressing against their skulls. The hive mind had taken notice, and it was sending its avatar. High above the city, a shadow descended. Wings the size of hab blocks unfolded. Bioplasma dripped from its claws. A hive tyrant, swollen with psychic energy, landed in the ruins, crushing an entire squad beneath its weight. Its screech split the air, a psychic command that made weaker men bleed from their ears. The stranger looked up. The hive tyrant's 4 eyes glowed with malice. It recognized him as a threat. They stood in silence for a moment, wind whipping between them. Then the tyrant lunged. A psychic blast rippled outward, tearing through stone and metal. The stranger didn't move. The energy hit him and dissipated, like wind hitting a mountain. He cracked his neck. Cute trick. Then he moved. He launched forward, faster than light, and hit the tyrant square in the chest. The impact unleashed a thunderclap that shattered windows for kilometers. The creature went flying backward, smashing through entire buildings before disappearing in a storm of rubble and flame.
The stranger didn't wait. He followed, a blur streaking through the smoke, and met the beast mid-air, driving it back down with an elbow strike that cratered the ground. The tyrant roared, thrashing, psychic lightning crackling around it, but every bolt that struck the man simply vanished, absorbed. He looked down at the monster struggling beneath him. "Where I come from," he said quietly, "we don't do mercy." He drove his fist through the tyrant's skull. The explosion was instantaneous, a dome of raw golden energy expanding outward in a perfect sphere, erasing everything for half a kilometer. When the light faded, there was nothing left but dust and silence. From orbit, the Mechanicus ships watched in stunned disbelief. Vox channels flooded with static-laced prayers. Inquisitor Varath whispered, "Emperor, preserve us all. That man just killed a hive tyrant with his hands." Lexum's Vox filters crackled. "Correction, Inquisitor. He killed it with whatever he is." Down below, the stranger stood amid the ash, expression calm. He turned his gaze toward the sky. "All right," he murmured. "Who's next?" And as if the galaxy itself had heard him, the warp shivered. Far across the void, in the eye of terror, something ancient stirred. The Chaos Gods had noticed too. The warp blinked. For a single heartbeat, the immaterium, that roiling sea of madness and eternal hunger, hesitated. It was as if the infinite chaos of the warp suddenly realized it was being watched. And then it screamed. The very fabric of reality quivered across the planet. Vox channels erupted in bursts of static and prayer. Astropaths clutched their heads and convulsed, their eyes rolling back as psychic waves crashed through their souls. From orbit, the Mechanicus fleet's Auspex arrays went dark. Sensors registered impossible readings, negative energy signatures, time loops, temperature fluctuations in the imaginary axis. Magos Lexum stared at his monitor. "Inquisitor, the warp's... it's fluctuating. It's reacting to him." "Reacting how?" Like it's afraid." Down in the shattered hive, the stranger stood amid the ruins, wind howling around him. The air shimmered, not with heat, but with wrongness. A shimmer became a shape. A shape became a scream. Warp rifts tore open in the sky, leaking red lightning and shadows that bled like liquid. Demons began to crawl through, first the lesser ones, gibbering and screeching, their bodies twisting in geometries that hurt to look at. Bloodletters with burning blades, horrors of Tzeentch, their laughter warping into sobs, plague-bearers dripping filth and entropy. They poured into reality, sniffing the air, tasting the psychic residue left by the destruction of the hive tyrant. And then they sensed him. Their shrieks changed pitch, no longer triumphant, but uncertain. The man looked up, squinting at the descending horrors. "So," he cracked his knuckles, "you're next." The first demon lunged, a bloodletter, roaring its devotion to Khorne. The stranger didn't even move. His gaze alone froze the creature mid-leap. The demonic fire in its blade flickered, sputtered, and died. Then, impossibly, the bloodletter began to unmake itself, not burned, not cut, but unwritten. Its form shimmered like a deleted line of reality, and then it was gone. The other demons recoiled. A horror of Tzeentch howled in rage, firing bolts of warp flame. The stranger tilted his head, and every flame reversed direction, consuming the demon that birthed them. A plague-bearer vomited a stream of corrosive bile. It evaporated in mid-air. The man frowned. "You're all the same. Talk big, die small." He raised his hand, and the warp flinched. Every demon froze, their shapes flickering like unstable holograms. The sky above them cracked open again, but this time something else appeared. Not another rift, but a blinding column of golden light. The Astronomicon itself, the psychic beacon of the Emperor, was reacting. On Terra, deep within the golden throne, thousands of psychers cried out in agony. The Emperor's light pulsed once, brighter than ever before, and for a moment the entire Imperium felt it. A single thought rippled through a billion souls. What is that? Inquisitor Vareth staggered in his command sanctum as the psychic wave hit him. His mind filled with visions, the stranger's silhouette surrounded by collapsing realities, his fists glowing like miniature suns, the warp retreating like a wounded animal. Mechanicus Lexum's mechadendritis spasmed. By the Omnissiah, he's not from the warp, he's outside it. Outside, Vareth gasped. A being unconnected to the immaterium. No soul signature, no warp resonance, no fate thread. That's impossible. And yet he there stands, Lexum said quietly. Back in the hive, the last demon made its move, a towering keeper of secrets, slithering forth from the largest rift. Its beauty was unbearable, its presence intoxicating. Even the stranger paused, if only for a heartbeat. It spoke in a voice that vibrated inside the skull. "Mortal, you are magnificent, a paradox in flesh. Come, join us, become what the gods cannot understand." He stared at it for a long moment. "I don't join monsters," he said flatly. The demon smiled wider, every tooth like a mirror shard. "Then perish, anomaly." It swung its claw, a blow that could tear titans apart, and the man caught it. The demon's grin faltered. He held the massive talon effortlessly, looked it in the eyes, and said, "You talk too much." Then he punched through its chest. The demon didn't die. It vanished, collapsing into a scream that echoed across the galaxy. That echo reached the ears of the Chaos Gods themselves. In the realm of chaos, the thrones trembled. Khorne bellowed in fury. "Who dares unmake my champions?" Tzeentch's laughter stuttered, uncertain. "A paradox, a being the warp cannot predict. This shouldn't exist." Nurgle's giggles turned to silence. Slaanesh shivered with a strange mix of fear and fascination. He is outside desire itself. For the first time in eternity, the ruinous powers felt something alien, a human emotion they had never known. Doubt. The warp fissures closed, the demons fled, the sky cleared, and standing alone in the ruins, the stranger looked upward. "Whatever's watching, you'd better bring your best." From orbit, the Emperor's tarot reshuffled itself spontaneously. Cards depicting death, the Fool, and the Emperor flickered, replaced by a new, never-before-seen image. A fist breaking the chains of fate. Inquisitor Vareth stared at it in horror. He's not a man, he's correction. The Eye of Terror roared. Planets of bone and rivers of blood shifted as the warp storm convulsed.
The mere presence of the intruder, this mortal, this anomaly, was a contagion that reality could not contain. Khorne, the blood god, rose from his skull throne like an erupting volcano given thought. Each motion cracked dimensions, each breath burned 1,000 demons to ash. You are not of this war. The voice of wrath itself. Even formless souls wept in terror. But the stranger only cracked his neck. Guess I am now. A gauntlet the size of continents came down, smashing through a world of skulls. The impact sent reality collapsing inward, warp fire, blood, and molten bones spiraling toward one point. When the blast cleared, Khorne stared at his palm. A human fist was holding it back, bare-handed. The god of war leaned closer, fangs of brass bared in disbelief. Impossible! The stranger smiled slightly. Guess I am now. He pushed. The god's colossal form reeled backward. Demons screamed as the shockwave vaporized whole layers of the immaterium. Khorne roared again, his voice boiling oceans of blood into steam. Every soul that ever fought, that ever killed, that ever bled, they are mine. I am war itself. The man stood motionless. Cute speech. He vanished, reappearing an instant later with a roundhouse kick that cracked eternity. Khorne's jaw snapped sideways, mountains of skulls crumbling beneath him. The god's ichor fell in storms, staining nebulae crimson. Billions of demons collapsed into nothing as the shock of the impact echoed through every timeline. In the Materium, ships across the segmentum solar felt it as a gravitational quake. Astropaths bled from their eyes. Navigators screamed incoherently. One word echoed through every warp-sensitive mind. Norris. Khorne rose again, his rage growing until it threatened to tear the warp apart. He drew his axe, Gorefather, a weapon forged from the marrow of extinct gods. Its edge alone could end galaxies. You cannot strike me down, mortal. Every blow only feeds me. The stranger shrugged. Then I'll hit you till you explode. He raised his fist. For the first time, the warp hesitated. The punch was silent. No thunder, no light. Just an absence. A hole where divine rage ceased to exist. Khorne's chest imploded. The god fell back upon his skull throne, split through with a wound that bled reality itself. What are you? The blood god rasped, voice dimming into echoes. The stranger's eyes glowed faintly blue. Justice. And with that, the god of war fell. The skull throne crumbled, its pillars collapsing into dust. Demons fled screaming as the oceans of blood froze into glass. The warp cracked. Across the Eye of Terror, the other Chaos gods felt it. Slaanesh's song faltered. Nurgle's garden withered. Tzeentch's infinite plans flickered, collapsing into chaos he could not foresee. He is undoing us, hissed the architect of fate. He ends conflict itself, shrieked Slaanesh. He brings silence, whispered Nurgle, voice trembling like a dying grandfather. In the distance, through the collapsing storms, a new sound began to rise. Laughter. Not mocking, not cruel. Simple, human laughter. The stranger looked around the battlefield, cracked his knuckles, and grinned. One down. He turned his gaze upward, through the warp's shattered ceiling, toward where Tzeentch's impossible palace glimmered in twisted geometry. 4 to go. The Emperor spoke. The sound was not heard through ears, nor carried by vox, nor bound to any single place or time. It rolled across the galaxy like a word too vast for human throats, resonating through the bones of stars. Every psyker in the Imperium convulsed at once. Astropaths screamed until their voices tore. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica became a chorus of agony and revelation. In the silent dark between worlds, the message was the same in every mind that could still think. Come. On Calthor Prime, the stranger froze mid-step. The light changed. The air grew still, as though the planet itself had stopped breathing. Behind him, Sergeant Hale dropped to his knees, clutching his head. "Sir, the light! It's inside my eyes!" A golden radiance poured from the horizon, bathing the ruins in sacred fire. It wasn't heat, it was will. The stranger tilted his head. Well, that's new. Then he vanished. No thunderclap, no flare, just the absence of where he'd been. Terra. The throne room was chaos. Servitors burned out, their circuits overloading. Custodians drew weapons in reflex, though they faced nothing visible. And then, from nowhere, he stood at the base of the golden throne. A single step had carried him across 10,000 light years. Even the Custodes hesitated. The stranger looked up at the immense golden corpse, a mountain of machinery and sanctified pain. He exhaled. So, you're the big man. The Emperor's eyes opened, twin suns flickering behind glass. The chamber shook. Every mortal presence fell prostrate, except one. The stranger folded his arms. You wanted to talk. A voice filled the air, deep and broken by millennia of silence. You do not belong to this age. I get that a lot. You are unbound by the warp, unwritten by fate. You stand where none should stand. Sounds lonely, doesn't it? The psychic radiance wavered, almost amused. Your presence unravels my enemies, yet your existence threatens my design. Maybe your design needs a tune-up. The Custodes twitched at his irreverence, but the Emperor stayed their hands with a flicker of thought. You have power even I cannot name. Tell me, what drives you? The man's expression softened, just slightly. Where I come from, we fight so others don't have to. That's all. Then you are a weapon without origin, or a reminder that the fight never ends. A long pause, the air hummed with golden electricity. I could keep you here, study you, bind you to the throne. "You could try," he said simply. Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, the Emperor laughed. It was a sound like the birth of suns and the end of empires. "No, you are free. But know this, chaos will come for you. They fear what they cannot touch." "Good," the stranger said, turning toward the great doors. "Let them." Beyond the palace, warp storms erupted across the segmentum solar. Demons howled in protest, their cries echoing through unreality. In the eye of terror, Khorne rose from his throne, blood rivers boiling. "He stands before the corpse god? Blasphemy!" Tzeentch hissed in thousands of voices. "Blasphemy? No, threat. He is entropy of prediction." Nurgle's laughter died to a cough. "He cleanses with indifference, even rot avoids him." Slaanesh whispered, shivering, "I cannot tempt him. He feels nothing." For the first time since the birth of the Immaterium, the Chaos Gods agreed on one thing: he must be destroyed. On Terra's surface, as the storms raged, the stranger walked through the marble halls of the Imperial Palace, followed at a cautious distance by custodes and adepts who dared not speak. The Inquisition swarmed around him, dozens of agents trying to record his passage. None of their devices retained data longer than seconds. He ignored them. He walked to a balcony overlooking the ash-gray city that had once been Earth. "Nice view," he said, to no one. "Bit of a fixer-upper." Behind him, Vareth approached, bowing low. "The Emperor has accepted you, then?" "Didn't say that. He just understood." "And what now?" The stranger looked skyward. Warp lightning forked across the heavens like veins in a dying heart. "Now," he said, "I think I go meet the neighbors." He raised one hand, space folded. A rift appeared leading directly into the swirling eye of terror. Gasps and shouts erupted from every Imperial present. "You can't," Vareth started, but he was already gone. The eye of terror. The warp howled as something alien intruded, something real. Where he stepped, the sea of madness froze into still plains of glass. Demons shattered like brittle icons. The tides of unreality recoiled from his presence. At the heart of it all, a voice thundered, "Who dares trespass upon the realm of gods?" He looked up. A red horizon, a throne of skulls, a titan of blood and rage. "Name's Norris, and I heard you've been making trouble." The warp shivered. The Imperium trembled. The event on Calthor Prime had spread across the galaxy like a psychic shockwave. Reports flooded the Voxnet, conflicting and chaotic, but all spoke of the same impossible truth. A lone human, unaided by the warp, unblessed by the Emperor, untouched by chaos, had annihilated a tyrannid swarm and dispersed demonic incursions with nothing but his bare hands. The Inquisition named him the Unwritten. The Mechanicus called him the Prime Constant. The Ecclesiarchy whispered of the fist of the Emperor returned. But among the terrified masses of the Imperium, one word spread faster than the rest. Norris. On Terra, within the vaults of the Imperial Palace, the High Lords gathered in secret. Their faces were etched with fear and wonder. Inquisitor Varath stood before them, the hololith of Calthor Prime rotating slowly above the table. "You've seen the transmission," he said. "This Norris, as the troops call him, exists outside the warp. The demons fled from him. Even the Astronomicon flickered." Lord Admiral Cass grunted. "And your suggestion?" Varath hesitated. "Containment, if possible." A ripple of laughter, bitter and hollow, passed through the chamber. "Contain that," hissed the representative of the Adeptus Mechanicus. "We can't even measure him. Every data recording we've attempted erases itself the moment he looks at it." "Then what would you propose?" Varath asked. "Observation, from a distance. If he serves the Emperor's purpose, let him act." A silence fell. The Inquisition knew what that meant. Fear disguised as reverence. The Imperium would rather worship him than try to understand him. Far above, the golden throne pulsed. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor's psychic beacon flared like a dying sun reignited. Thousands of psychers in the palace fell to their knees, bleeding from their eyes. The Astronomicon blazed brighter than ever, then dimmed as though something vast and unseen had passed before it. Deep within the throne chamber, tech priest attendants froze. Instruments screamed warnings no one had ever seen. A whisper echoed across every soul attuned to the warp. "Who walks in my light unbidden?" For one instant the Emperor stirred, and in that instant the warp recoiled. On Calthor Prime, the stranger walked through the ruins, surrounded by silence. The air was thick with ash and residual psychic static. His boots crunched over the remains of what had once been a hive city. He paused beside a ruined imperial shrine, its statue of the Emperor shattered by bombardment. Only the outstretched hand remained, pointing toward the heavens. He looked at it for a long time. "Seems we've both had a rough few millennia," he muttered. The vox crackled in his ear. It wasn't his. He didn't have one. The voice simply was there. "Identify yourself," came the cold, precise tone of a Mechanicus Magos. "By decree of the Inquisition, you are ordered to submit to analysis." He sighed. "You people really don't learn, do you? Resisting imperial authority is heresy." He smirked. "You'll need more than that word where I come from." And with that, he vanished in a blur, leaving nothing but a shockwave of displaced air. The Mechanicus Auspex lit up across half the planet as something faster than teleportation moved across their sensors. In the void above Calthor Prime, a fleet hung like a dagger in the dark. The flagship, Vigil of Titan, bore the markings of the Grey Knights. Within its sanctum, Grand Master Thussian studied the data feed. "You're certain he's not a demon?" he asked. "Positive," replied Inquisitor Varath, standing beside him. "He lacks a soul signature, yes, but there's no corruption, no taint. He's clean." Thussian frowned. "A being beyond the warp. That would make him immune to both chaos and psychic influence." "And to faith," Varath added quietly. "He doesn't pray, doesn't need to." "Then he is dangerous." "To whom?" Varath asked. Thussian didn't answer.
Meanwhile, in the field below, the 112th Astra Militarum watched their savior walk through firestorms and shattered mountains. Sergeant Hale, still alive through sheer miracle, led what remained of his company toward him. They found the man standing on a cliff, staring at the horizon. "Sir," Hale called, saluting despite his shaking hands. "By the throne, it's an honor." The man turned. "You fought well, soldier. We saw you tear through them like they were made of paper. Are you one of his angels?" A faint grin. "Nah, I'm just a man who doesn't quit." Hale frowned. "Then what are you doing here?" "Don't know," he admitted. "I was in one world, then I wasn't. Next thing I know, your sky's on fire and everything wants me dead, so I started punching." The guardsmen exchanged looks, half disbelief, half awe. "If you're fighting for us, then we'll follow you to the gates of hell." The man's grin widened. "Hell, huh? Been there. They didn't like me much either." At that moment, the sky above them tore open again, not with demons, but with imperial dropships. Grey knights descended in gleaming silver armor, landing in disciplined formation. The air shimmered with psychic containment fields and hexagrammic wards. Grand Master Thasian himself stepped forward, nemesis blade brawn. "By order of the Ordo Malum, you will accompany us to Terra." The stranger folded his arms. "And if I don't feel like it?" Thasian's voice was iron. "Then we will compel you." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "You can try." For a moment, the universe held its breath. Then the Grey Knights charged. They moved faster than any mortal soldiers, psychic light trailing their blades, but before the first could strike, the stranger moved. He didn't fight them. He simply stepped between moments. 1 second, the Grey Knights were attacking. The next, they were all on the ground, disarmed, their armor intact, but their weapons melted into slag. The man stood in their midst, unscathed. "You done?" Thasian staggered to his knees, his psychic wards flickering. He looked up in awe. You exist outside the Emperor's design." The stranger's voice was calm. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm the design you weren't supposed to understand." And as the Grey Knights knelt, some in reverence, others in sheer disbelief, the sky above them began to burn gold. The Astronomicon pulsed again, and somewhere on Terra, deep within the throne, the Emperor's desiccated lips moved.
Tzeentch's realm was not a place. It was an idea. Infinite spirals of shimmering logic, fractal storms of thought, rivers of possibility, cascading backward through time. Within this maze of destiny, the god of change watched the intruders advance and smiled with 1,000 mouths. "Fascinating," Tzeentch mused, each syllable twisting into light. "A being unbound by causality, existing without warp resonance, immune to corruption. What are you, anomaly? A dream that refuses to die?" He extended his hand, a universe of burning glyphs coalescing into runes of command. With a gesture, he rewrote the past. And yet, the mortal kept walking. Reality buckled and reformed. In one strand of time, Chuck Norris was never born. In another, he perished on an unremarkable earth centuries before the Imperium's rise. In another still, he was a demon of corn, a legend corrupted by wrath. But each time Tzeentch rewrote the narrative, the same truth returned to him. The man persisted, unmoved, unaffected, untouched. "You can't delete what never uploaded," the stranger said, walking through the molten symbols of fate as if they were fog. The changer of ways grew agitated. Wings of flame spread wide, each feather a prophecy unraveling. Millions of screaming psychers were born and died in an instant, their minds shattered under the strain of his power. "Do you not understand?" Tzeentch thundered. "I am the script. I am the story. Every thought, every motion, every moment bends to my design." The mortal smiled. "And you're talking to the editor." He stepped forward, and time paused. Every possible version of the warp froze mid-breath. Every paradox, every illusion, every manipulation halted as if bound by unseen gravity. Tzeentch stared, for the first time feeling what no god had felt since creation: confusion. You cannot exist outside of narrative causality. You are bound to the plot of the universe, whispered the architect. Chuck reached out and flicked one of the floating runes. It shattered into light. "I stopped following scripts a long time ago." Tzeentch's fury ignited. From his eyes burst storms of rewriting fire, entire galaxies of symbols burning across the void. The warp became a living codex, rewriting itself every microsecond. He screamed words of pure will. "Undo yourself." The universe convulsed, stars inverted, time lost direction. Every memory of the stranger was wiped from mortal minds, and still he walked forward. For a moment, Tzeentch tried something new. He split into infinite versions of himself, one pleading, one negotiating, one curious. "You are potential incarnate. Join me. Together we could reshape eternity." Chuck tilted his head. "You're all talk and feathers. No deal." Then, for the first time, Tzeentch saw what terrified him most. Behind the mortal's eyes was not light or warp energy. It was nothing. A perfect void, a will that could not be rewritten. That was when the architect realized this was not a being inside his game. It was the end of the game. Chuck lifted a finger. The warp cracked into a grid of blue light, the raw code of reality itself. He pointed once. Tzeentch's forms began collapsing, not burning, but debugging. Whole threads of destiny snapped like overstretched cords. Futures unspooled. Prophecies failed to render. For the first time since the dawn of thought, Tzeentch forgot his own name. "Impossible! I am knowledge! I am—" "Not anymore." The punch came silently again, not through space, but through concept. The god of change folded inward, his impossible palace disintegrating into static. The rivers of fate went still, and the warp screamed. Across the galaxy, every psyker suddenly went blind to the future. Inquisitors' tarot cards turned blank. Even the Emperor's golden throne flickered with unease. Something fundamental had been erased. The changer of ways was gone. The stranger stood amidst the wreckage of causality. Fragments of prophecy and memory swirled around him, whispering of undone futures and rewritten pasts. He exhaled slowly, looking into the infinite dark where the god had stood. 2 down. Behind him, a shadow fell, thick and oily and rotting. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay and rebirth. From the horizon of the dead warp, Nurgle's laughter rolled like thunder. "Oh, little mortal," the Plague Father chuckled warmly. "Let Grandfather show you some love." Chuck flexed his fingers. Gross. He turned to face the god of rot.
The warp shifted again. Where Tzeentch's realm had been a kaleidoscope of madness and motion, this place was still, thick, warm, and wet. The air itself seemed to breathe. He stood ankle-deep in sludge, where blossoms of flesh opened and closed like lungs. The trees were bone, the rivers pulsed with pus. Every surface glistened, and beneath it all ran the steady heartbeat of something alive. From the distance came laughter, the kind of laugh that wrapped around you like a blanket, equal parts comfort and horror.
"Oh, little one, welcome to Grandfather's garden."
The voice rolled through the landscape, vibrating through the mud. Flies swarmed into shapes, faces, limbs, eyes, and assembled into a giant of rot. Nurgle loomed like a mountain of filth, his belly split open to reveal lesser daemons birthing from his guts, giggling as they crawled into the muck. His eyes were pits of tenderness and doom.
"You look unwell, my child, so pale, so fragile. Come, let me cure your suffering."
Chuck Norris looked down at the filth clinging to his boots, sighed, and said, "I don't get sick." The laughter faltered. Flies stilled mid-flight. The stench of decay thinned, replaced by a crisp wind that Nurgle hadn't felt since the galaxy was young.
"Impossible! There is rot in all things, child. There is no life without decay."
The mortal smiled faintly. "Then you've been looking at life wrong." He bent and touched the ground. Where his fingers met the slime, it evaporated. Not burned, not purified, simply gone. Beneath it, for the first time in eons, the soil of Nurgle's realm was clean. Flowers bloomed, not of flesh or mold, but real, green things that drank the light. A shudder went through the god's bulk.
"No!"
Nurgle swung his rusted scythe, the weapon's sweep forming hurricanes of contagion. Plagues that had ended civilizations, diseases that even daemons feared, filled the air in clouds of agony. Chuck just breathed in. Nothing happened.
No blisters, no cough, no rot. His skin glowed faintly golden. Tried that already. Back on Earth, they called it flu season. Nurgle roared, shaking his entire realm. The ground opened into pits of writhing maggots. Titans of rot emerged, great unclean ones towering over the mortal, each vomiting storms of pestilence. They lunged. Chuck met them with a flicker of movement. His foot connected, once, just once, and the air rippled outward in concentric waves. When the motion stopped, a silence settled over the garden. The great unclean ones had vanished. In their place stood men, mortal, whole, confused, former victims of Nurgle's plagues, reborn and breathing clean air for the first time in eternity. What is this? I cannot heal corruption. It defines existence. Chuck looked around at the resurrected souls, now wandering the blooming garden. I guess I just undefined it. The Plague Father's voice cracked, not with rage, but grief. You take my gifts away, my purpose, the cycle of life and death. Chuck turned his gaze to him, calm and steady. Maybe you've confused comfort with control. People don't need your rot to be strong. The god wept. His tears were acid rain, corroding galaxies of thought, yet they could not touch the stranger. The mortal stepped forward and placed a hand upon the god's massive arm. The moment he did, Nurgle's flesh began to flake away, not as decay, but as renewal. Underneath the putrid skin, light began to shine, soft and golden, like dawn breaking over ancient ruins. No more pain, Chuck said quietly. Not for them, not for you. For the first time since creation, Nurgle was silent. The laughter that had echoed across eternity died, replaced by a sigh, gentle, grateful. Thank you, the god of rot whispered, and then, like mist under sunlight, he was gone. The garden was still. Where filth had once reigned, there now spread endless green plains, untouched, pure, alive. The souls that had been bound to pestilence looked around in wonder, tears falling freely. And in the wind, faint and almost human, came a final murmur. Life goes on. The stranger looked at his hands, flexed them, and glanced skyward. 3 down. Above him, the warp trembled. Lightning split the sky, but not lightning of any natural color. It was pleasure itself, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. The air grew hot. Voices whispered sweet promises of indulgence and ecstasy. From the distance, laughter, rich, alluring, terrible, echoed across the horizon. Oh, darling, you've undone my brothers. Let's see if you can handle me. Chuck squinted. This is going to be awkward.